The African sun blazed mercilessly over the open plains of the Serengeti. Heat shimmered off the cracked earth, bending the horizon in waves of light. Dust hovered in the still air, clinging to the sparse grasses and the occasional twisted acacia tree. Birds had retreated to the shade, and the only sounds were the soft rustling of wind and the distant hum of life hidden away from the noon glare. Among the vast openness moved a small figure, swift, low to the ground, driven by instinct and curiosity. His name was Rusty, a medium-sized dog with amber-colored eyes and a coat the color of desert sand. Rusty had been raised among humans since he was a pup. Loyal, smart, and alert, he had become the constant companion of Dr. Caleb Moore, a wildlife biologist studying the behavioral patterns of African lions. Rusty had roamed forests, crossed rivers, and braved mountains by Caleb's side. But the open savanna was different. It was vast, raw, and wild in a way even Rusty didn't fully understand. That morning had started like any other. Caleb had set up motion-triggered cameras near a cluster of known lion territory, hoping to capture footage for his research. Rusty had been at his side, tail wagging, sniffing at old tracks and paw prints. Everything was familiar, until a distant scent caught his nose. Something fast, something new. Without hesitation, Rusty bounded away from camp, nose to the ground, following the scent trail through a patch of long grass. He didn't hear Caleb's voice calling him back. He didn't realize how far he had gone. And he didn't know he was crossing into forbidden ground. By the time Rusty stopped, panting and alert, the trail had vanished, but so had everything else. There were no tents, no jeeps, no sounds of human life. Only endless grass, sharp sun and a slow, creeping awareness. He was alone. Rusty barked once, then twice. Ears perked, tail stiff. Then came the rustle. Men, 3 of them, emerged from the bush like ghosts. They wore mismatched camouflage, sun-scorched boots, and carried rifles slung across their backs. One of them smiled wide when he saw the dog. "Well, would you look at that?" he muttered in Afrikaans. "Perfect bait." Rusty growled and backed away. But he wasn't fast enough. A net was thrown. He dodged once but got tangled in the second. Rough hands grabbed him. He bit one of them, drawing blood, but a swift blow to the ribs sent him crumpling to the dirt. When he opened his eyes, he was bound. The hunters tied Rusty to the base of a small tree, rough bark scratching against his side. A heavy rope wound tightly around his chest and front legs. He couldn't move. He could barely breathe. One of the men set up a motion-activated camera nearby and a small radio beacon. The bait was ready. They wanted lions, and Rusty, now helpless and exposed, would draw them in. Then they vanished into the brush to wait. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky from gold to orange. The shadows of the acacias stretched long and thin across the ground. Rusty sat still. He didn't bark. He didn't struggle. He knew panic would only waste energy. But inside, his heart beat fast, not with fear for himself, but for the one person he couldn't protect now. Caleb. Was he looking for him? Was he safe? Would he even know where to begin? Rusty's ears twitched. There, a sound. Not human. Low, rhythmic, padded. Pause. 3 lionesses stepped out of the grass like smoke. Sleek, muscular. Their coats glowed in the twilight. Golden and smooth. Their eyes glinted with the hunger of predators at dusk. They had followed the scent. Now they had found its source. One of them growled low in her throat. Ears pinning back slightly, she approached Rusty in a slow arc, testing the distance. The others fanned out, surrounding the small tree, tails flicking. Rusty didn't move. He didn't whimper. He knew enough about lions to know they were curious before they were deadly, and that fear often made prey look more appetizing. He held their gaze. He didn't blink. And yet, he was prey. Tied, exposed, outnumbered. The lead lioness crouched, muscles tensing. Her jaw parted slightly, revealing sharp, yellowed teeth. Rusty remained still. Just as she took her first step forward, a roar shattered the sky. It wasn't like the lioness's sounds. This was deeper, older, a sound that carried through the ground and made birds take flight. A voice of command, not curiosity. From the eastern ridge came a 4th lion. He was massive, larger than any Rusty had ever seen. His mane was a tangled crown of golden and black, flowing with dust and scars. One long scar ran across his left eye, giving him a permanent, hardened squint. This was Leo, the alpha, the king. The lionesses immediately backed away, forming a semicircle behind him. Their tails lowered, their heads bowed. The hierarchy was clear. Leo strode forward, slow and sure, never taking his eyes off Rusty. The dog looked back, unflinching. For a long, tense moment, predator and prey held each other's gaze. Then Leo stopped, tilted his head slightly, and blinked. Recognition flickered. It wasn't immediate, but it was there, buried in instinct and memory. Leo sniffed the air again. A familiar scent, something from long ago, though not that long. And then, he remembered. A year earlier, Leo had been wounded, badly. A fight with a rival male had left him bloodied and weak. Lying in the dry grass just outside the research outpost where Caleb had been working. Lions never seek help, but that day, fate intervened. It was Rusty who found him first. Rusty who barked and barked until Caleb followed. Rusty who stayed near, unmoving, as Caleb approached with sedatives and antiseptic and hope. Leo had been tranquilized, treated, and released days later, alive because of a dog that refused to walk away. And now, here that same dog was tied, exposed, surrounded by Leo's pride. Leo took another step forward. He growled, not in warning, but in frustration. What was this betrayal? Who would leave a rescuer to die in the wild like a piece of meat? He looked at the rope, then at the lionesses, then at Rusty. The dog didn't move. He didn't need to, because now, Leo remembered everything. The sun had sunk lower in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the dry savanna floor. The air, still heavy with heat, now shimmered with a golden haze. From his place beneath the tree, Rusty sat motionless, his body taut with exhaustion, his legs still bound by the hunter's rope. His ears twitched, his breathing shallow. He wasn't alone. The soft, rhythmic padding of paws drew nearer, silent, practiced, purposeful. From between the grasses, 3 lionesses emerged like spirits summoned by the scent of vulnerability. Their eyes gleamed in the dimming light. Their fur rippled like silk stretched over muscle and claw. Predators. Effortless. Lethal. They moved as one, synchronized in their approach. Honed by instinct and hunger. Their noses flared, picking up Rusty's scent. One gave a soft growl of anticipation. Rusty didn't flinch. He watched them come, his heart pounding inside his ribs like a tribal drum. The fear was real, raw and ancient, but it didn't control him. His instincts, shaped by years beside humans and hours in the wild, told him that movement might spark the final chase. So he sat still, eyes wide, ears alert, rope tight against his chest. And he waited. The lead lioness, larger than the others and likely the oldest, circled slowly. Her lips parted just enough to reveal gleaming teeth, and her low rumble vibrated through the ground. Her golden eyes locked on Rusty, studying, judging. To her, Rusty wasn't another predator. He wasn't even a rival. He was meat, fresh, tied, defenseless. She stepped closer. Rusty's breath hitched. Still, he didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't even whimper. There was no use. The second lioness came up behind him, lowering her head, sniffing the air just inches from his tail. The third remained behind the others, her head low, tail flicking, waiting for the signal. All 3 surrounded him now, close enough for Rusty to feel their breath on his fur. It was the rawest moment of his life. Time slowed. His muscles trembled beneath his skin, not from pain, but restraint, not from cowardice, but from something harder, the will to remain calm in the face of death. And still he looked at them, eyes wide, open, honest. In those amber eyes, something stirred, something the lionesses did not expect. Not panic, not pleading, but peace. The lead lioness paused. She tilted her head, confused by the dog's stillness. She was used to prey that kicked and cried, that thrashed and bled. She was used to fear, the flavor of the hunt. But Rusty offered her none of that. Just silence, just stillness, just the wind pressing through the savanna grass. In his eyes was a story not yet told, a tale of loyalty, of choices made far beyond the survival instinct. His was a gaze that spoke of another world, of companionship, of firelight and tents, of hands that fed and voices that soothed. The lioness stepped back slightly. She blinked. The second lioness growled, impatient. Her muscles coiled, ready to pounce. The third one hissed sharply, nudging her forward. The standoff couldn't last forever. Rusty turned his head and looked at the impatient one. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something unspoken passed between them. She froze, just for a moment, just enough to see. The lioness took one cautious step back, then stopped. She looked to her leader. There was no command, only instinct. And something was changing. The stillness was no longer weakness. It was intentional. Rusty wasn't offering himself as prey. He was offering trust. The rope kept him bound. Yes, but his silence, his calm, his unwavering stare, was a declaration louder than any bark or snarl. He would not beg. He would not fight. He would not run. Because somehow, in his heart, he believed he wouldn't die today. The lionesses paced now, agitated. This was not how it was supposed to be. Hunger gnawed at them, but the dog wasn't prey in the way they understood it. He smelled different, moved different, looked different. One of them sniffed the rope, growled low. The leader stepped closer again, testing the air, her nose nearly brushing Rusty's cheek. Still, nothing. And then, a deeper growl echoed from the distance. It wasn't aggressive. It was final. From the ridgeline behind the acacia grove, a towering shadow approached, slow, deliberate, commanding. Leo, the Lion King. Rusty's head turned toward the sound. Ears flicking. The lionesses stepped aside in unison. Their ears lowered, their tails falling still. They formed a half-circle behind Rusty now, no longer surrounding him, but waiting. Leo walked through them like wind through tall grass, brushing past his pride without a glance. His mane, dark and tangled with dust, swayed with each step. His eyes were fixed on the dog, intense, searching. Rusty met his gaze. For a long, suspended moment, time held its breath again. The setting sun painted both of them in shades of fire, the lion, lord of the wild, and the dog, the bound and silent outsider. Rusty's ears lowered slightly, but he didn't look away. Leo came closer, his massive head lowered to Rusty's level, nose twitching. The lion inhaled, and then froze, because in the scent, beneath the dust and rope and sweat, was a thread of memory, a trail back to the time when Leo had lain bleeding and broken under the scorching sun. Life slipping away, and a dog had come. Not to chase, not to flee, but to call for help. A dog who barked until the humans arrived. A dog who didn't leave. A dog who saved a king. Leo's breath came heavier now. His amber eyes softened. The rope, the tree, the hunters. It all made sense. He looked around, then gave a single, sharp huff, a signal. The lionesses stepped back. Then he moved closer, and with deliberate, careful strength, he bit through the rope. From the far ridge, beyond the line of thorn trees and dry brush, a sound rumbled through the air like distant thunder. A single, deafening roar. It rolled across the plains, shaking birds from the trees, startling prey animals into frozen stillness. The lionesses flanking Rusty immediately stopped moving, their ears pinning back, their heads snapping toward the sound. They knew that voice. Leo had returned. The alpha male stepped out of the brush moments later, his towering frame a silhouette against the glowing horizon. He moved slowly, deliberately, not in a rush, not in fear, but with the calm certainty of a creature who feared nothing. His mane, thick and unruly, framed his powerful neck like a royal crown tangled in the dust of battle. His body bore the wear of many fights, old scars, fresh scrapes, the rough texture of survival etched into every muscle. But it was his face that truly told the story. A long, jagged scar crossed above his right eye, pulling the skin slightly downward. It gave him a constant look of scrutiny, as if he were always calculating, always judging. And now, those sharp, golden eyes had locked on a single point ahead. Rusty. The lionesses fell back without hesitation, forming a respectful arc behind Leo. They didn't dare act without his command. The hierarchy in the pride was absolute. Rusty didn't move, bound to the base of the tree. He simply looked up as Leo approached. His breathing slowed, his body was still, but inside, every sense was alert. This lion was not like the others. There was something older, deeper about him, not just in power, but in presence. Leo stopped a few feet away from Rusty. The massive lion's chest rose and fell slowly. He said nothing, but the silence was louder than any roar. The wind shifted. Leo stepped closer. Rusty tensed, but didn't growl or bark. His instinct said run, but his body said trust, as it had once before. Leo loomed over him now. Head lowered, nose twitching slightly. The alpha's pupils narrowed. Something, a scent, familiar. He tilted his head, blinking slowly. He took in the image before him. A dog. Tied, breathing hard, surrounded by lions but not torn apart. It didn't make sense. Until it did. A fragment of memory returned. A flash of heat, pain, blood in the grass. Leo had fought a rogue male lion just outside the edge of his territory nearly a year ago. The fight was brutal. He had won, barely, but he had limped away, half-conscious, gushing blood from a deep wound along his ribcage. He had collapsed near a ridge. Alone, in full view of the sun. Buzzards had begun circling. The strength to stand had vanished. And then, barking. Not the high yapping of scavengers. Not the howl of jackals. But sharp, urgent, relentless barking. The voice of something small, but determined. A dog. Rusty. Leo had seen him, vaguely, a blurry figure darting through the grass. The dog hadn't run. It had approached, barked wildly, and then disappeared. Moments later, humans arrived. Voices, equipment, scent of antiseptic. Leo had felt the sting of a dart. Darkness. He had awoken days later. Weak but alive. The humans had left him in peace. His wounds had closed. And the dog had never returned. But the scent was the same. It was him. Leo stood still now, staring into Rusty's eyes. He saw the same look, calm, unwavering, unafraid. It was not the look of prey. It was the look of a savior. He stepped back slowly. The lionesses behind him shifted nervously. One of them growled softly in confusion. The other two looked at each other, uncertain. Leo turned his head toward them and released a single, low growl. It wasn't loud, but it meant everything. Stand down. Then he turned back to Rusty, who hadn't moved. The rope was still tight around the dog's chest and front legs. Leo lowered his head, sniffed once more, then raised a single massive paw. Rusty tensed instinctively, but didn't look away. And Leo, with surprising gentleness, pressed his paw against the knot. It was tight, thick. He nudged at it again, then opened his jaws and bit into the rope, not to tear flesh, but to free it. His teeth pulled, the fibers strained, and then, with one snap, the knot broke. The rope unraveled, coiling down into the dirt. Rusty stumbled slightly as he stood, stiff from being bound, legs shaky beneath him, but he stood. Leo stepped back and sat. A silent signal. "You are not our enemy. You are free." Rusty looked around, the lionesses still watching from behind. Confused but obedient, he turned back to Leo and lowered his head slowly. Not submission, not fear, just respect. For a brief moment, the two locked eyes again. The king of the savannah, and the dog who had once barked so loudly, not for himself, but for someone else's life. No words passed, none were needed. Then Leo rose to his feet. He turned his head once toward the open grassland, then looked back at his pride. Another soft growl. They followed. One by one, the lions slipped into the brush, leaving Rusty alone under the setting sun. Rusty stood there for a long time, heart pounding, legs trembling, but spirit whole. The lions were gone. He was free, and somehow, impossibly, he had been spared. Not by mercy, but by memory. The rope slackened. Rusty's limbs ached from hours of restraint. But as the final knot slipped free and dropped to the dirt, he didn't move. The thick fibers now lay in a broken coil at his paws. No longer a shackle, only a memory. He blinked. Once, slowly. Standing less than a meter away was Leo. The Lion King, his massive head just lifted from where his powerful jaws had cut through the bonds. Bits of frayed rope still clung to his mane. Silence pressed around them like a dome. The wind had calmed. The grasses stood still. Even the insects held their song. Behind them, the three lionesses remained frozen in disbelief. They had seen their alpha fight for territory, take down prey twice his size, roar rivals into retreat. But this act, was something they could not process. He had freed the prey. And not just spared it. He had worked to liberate it. As if the act of biting rope was more urgent than biting flesh. The lionesses exchanged glances, tense and uncertain. The younger of the three paced slightly, tail twitching, confused by instinct clashing with obedience. But none of them dared move. Because Leo hadn't roared yet. But they could feel it building. Rusty shifted his weight and stood. The motion was stiff, cautious. His muscles were sore, and one paw had gone numb. But he stood tall, wobbling. Yes, but upright. His eyes never left Leo. He didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't run. Instead, he took a shaky step forward. And then lowered his head. Not as prey to predator. Not as the weak to the strong. But as one soul offering respect to another. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't submission. It was the quietest expression of something much harder to earn than fear. Gratitude. Leo blinked, as if accepting the gesture. He took a step back, raising his head higher, shoulders rolling. His mane shifted in the breeze like a slow-moving crown. He turned, surveying his pride, then looked out toward the open land beyond the tree. Then, at last, the sound came, a low, deep rumble from his chest, not a roar, but something close, a signal, a command, and every lion in the area heard it, not with their ears, but in their bones. "Stand down." The lionesses lowered their heads. The tension fell away from their shoulders. Their bodies relaxed, even if their minds were still turning. The youngest among them let out a huff of frustration. But she didn't disobey, she simply turned and walked into the grass, vanishing in the tall golden stalks. The others followed, melting into the terrain like ghosts. Only Leo remained. Rusty stood still, watching them go. The savannah opened before him now, vast, dangerous, and unfamiliar, but not hostile. Not anymore, because something sacred had happened. Something that would not be recorded in textbooks or wildlife journals. No researcher would witness it. No camera trap would capture the truth. But here, in this remote corner of Africa, a king had spared a life. Not because it was convenient, but because he remembered what it meant to be saved. Leo turned to leave. He gave Rusty one last look, a slow, steady gaze that held no malice. Just memory. Then he walked away, his paws silent on the earth, his mane catching the fading light like strands of fire. Rusty watched him go, not moving until the lion's figure had disappeared completely into the brush. Only then did he breathe deeply. Not in fear, but in peace. He looked down at the remains of the rope. It lay broken at his feet, a symbol of captivity undone, not by human hands, but by the very beast it was meant to lure. Rusty stepped over it. He sniffed the air. The scent of Caleb was faint but real, upwind, possibly a few kilometers away. His instincts kicked in, like muscle memory waking up after sleep. He turned, trotted forward slowly at first, then faster. Each stride became stronger, more assured. The earth beneath his paws no longer felt like a trap. It felt like home, far behind him, in the shade of the trees. Leo stood for a moment longer than he needed to. He watched the trail Rusty had taken. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. His duty, whatever it had been, was complete. He had honored a bond that only creatures of the wild understand, not written in law, but carved into the marrow of the earth. Do not forget the one who helped you rise. By the time the sun touched the horizon, Rusty had crossed 2 dry gullies and reached the edge of a dirt trail. The scent of fuel and metal was stronger now. Then, he saw it. A figure running. A man, his arms outstretched. Rusty. It was Caleb. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. He dropped to his knees as Rusty collapsed into his arms. Tail wagging weakly, eyes half closed from exhaustion. "You found your way back." Caleb buried his face into Rusty's neck. His voice breaking. "I thought I lost you." Rusty let out a soft whimper and pressed into him. In the distance, the sun dipped behind the hill. The savannah held its breath again. And the wild, for once, was still. The horizon shimmered with the last golden light of day. The sun was sinking into the edge of the world, bleeding orange and crimson across the African sky. Shadows grew long, dancing across the dry grasses of the savanna. And in the distance, barely a speck against the burning canvas of dusk, a figure appeared. At first, it was only movement, a flicker, a whisper of life. Then the form took shape. 4 legs, a dust-covered coat, a lowered head and a tail that wagged once. Then again, stronger. It was Rusty. Each step he took sent dust swirling into the air, coating his tired body in a film of red-gold earth. His paws were cracked. His sides still ached from the binding. But there was something unmistakable in the way he walked now. Not fear, not weakness, but pride. The pride of one who had stood in the den of lions and lived. He crested a low hill. And below him, in a wide clearing near the research camp, stood a familiar figure, bent over, adjusting a field transmitter. Dr. Caleb Moore. Caleb was not the kind of man who cried easily. He had seen droughts, death, and the brutal reality of life in the wild. But he had never known heartbreak like the day Rusty vanished. He had searched for hours, days. He hadn't slept. He had barely eaten. The men from the nearby village helped comb the area. But all signs of Rusty had disappeared. The trackers found paw prints and drag marks. There had been talk of poachers, of bait. Caleb had feared the worst. But even then, he never stopped calling Rusty's name. And now, as he looked up to stretch, he saw a shape moving through the haze. He froze. His breath caught. Rusty. He dropped the transmitter. His heart slammed against his ribs. The shape grew closer. The outline sharpened. Fur, tail, ears perked. Rusty. The dog broke into a limping run as Caleb sprinted up the hill. The last rays of sun caught them in their collision, man and dog. Heart and heart. Rusty collapsed into Caleb's arms. Tongue lolling, body trembling, tail thumping weakly, Caleb knelt in the dust, laughing and sobbing all at once. "You came back," he whispered into Rusty's fur. "You came back to me." He ran his hands down Rusty's spine, feeling the scars, the rope burn, the ribs. His voice broke. "What did they do to you?" But Rusty only looked up at him with bright, tired eyes, and in them, Caleb saw something else. Not pain, not trauma, but wisdom and peace. That night, under a sky filled with stars, Caleb sat beside the fire. Rusty curled up beside him, sleeping deeply for the first time in days. And for the first time in his life, Caleb told a story that he would go on to tell for the rest of his days. To his team, to his family, to strangers who visited his research camp, to children from the villages nearby. "My dog once stood in the middle of a lion's territory," he'd say, his voice calm but laced with reverence. "They surrounded him. They could have ended him in seconds. But their king, a great lion named Leo, looked at Rusty, and remembered. You see, my Rusty once saved that lion's life. He barked until I followed him out to where Leo lay dying. I treated his wounds, let him go free, and when Leo saw Rusty again, tired and helpless, he did something no one would believe. He spared him. He freed him. He let him go. Because in the wild, mercy is rare, but kindness is never forgotten. In time, the story became more than just Caleb's memory. It became legend. Whispers passed through local villages about the dog who stood among lions. They said a lion once bowed his head to a dog, not because he had to, but because honor demanded it. Children grew up hearing the tale beneath starlit skies. There was once a dog named Rusty, who saved a king, and when fate turned against him, that king returned the favor. The tale reached wildlife rangers, biologists, and eventually even conservationists around the world. People debated it, questioned the truth of it. But those who had seen Caleb and Rusty together never doubted. And those who had walked the savannah claimed that, if you ventured far enough, deep enough, into the heart of lion country, you might find a lion with a scar across his eye, resting beneath an acacia tree, watching, listening, waiting, for nothing, for everything, because somewhere in his ancient memory, there still lived a moment when a creature so small, so unexpected, had done something no beast ever forgets, had shown mercy. Rusty lived many more years, never straying too far from camp again. But sometimes, on quiet mornings, he would stand still at the edge of the bush, staring out at the horizon. And Caleb, watching from the shade, always knew what he was thinking. Not fear, not regret, but respect, for the one who ruled that land, and for the silent bond they now shared. A bond that transcended species, that outlived rope and teeth and instinct, that would echo long after both of them were gone. So it was written, there once was a dog who walked into the wild, and stood before lions without trembling. The lions came to kill him, but their king remembered, and so, the dog walked away, not as prey, but as legend.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.